Greetings, dear soul, and thank you for joining me for episode 17, A Course in Editing. This video will help you understand the answer to these questions, among others. So let's just jump right in. As I mentioned, today is day 5 of myself downloading the app for the complete and annotated edition, the CE version. And in it, there's a very large explanation for this edition and how it was made and everything. So it's all there. I'm not going to read much of this for you. It explains everything about the book. On this page here, early on, the voice would sometimes correct something she wrote down, she being Helen, saying that she hadn't heard correctly, and she herself would often make 2 or 3 attempts at accurately rendering a particular statement. But as the dictation went on, these corrections diminished, and she was increasingly thanked by the voice for taking down its words exactly as she had been given them. She herself said the voice was Jesus, although the voice never self-identified as Jesus. My only reason for bringing that up is because the man's name was Yehoshua ben Yusuf, shortened to Yeshua ben Yusuf. Jesus Christ was not his name whatsoever, and to use that terminology means you're including everything of the last 300 to 500 years that Christianity and Catholicism has included along with those 2 words. The human mind works by associationism. So if you say Jesus Christ, you cannot help but carry along with that all of the weight, all of the heaviness, all of the negativity, all of the suffering that goes along with it. So I refer to him as his real name, Yeshua. Next page talks about the text, and then the 3rd one, and then the 4th version was actually the Hugh Lynn Casey version, which is very interesting. And I'm going to take us on another little aside here into the Mayan calendar, because Edgar was mentioned a couple of times, and I found that him and his son have a very similar Mayan birthday that you would never notice if you just look at their actual birthday. But when you put them side by side, their full profile, you see that, wow, Edgar has starseed for his divine masculine guide, and Hugh Lynn has jaguar shaman for his divine feminine guide. And then there are 2 more glyphs that they both share. Interestingly, Hugh Lynn's are both on his masculine side and Edgar's both on his feminine. And then they also share the main birth tone for each other in their charts. So I just want to point out that the divine Mayan Tzolk'in calendar is revealing things to us, synchronicities that cannot be seen in any other way. Now back to the editing. The next page tells us about the 5th edition, the Foundation for Inner Peace, 1st edition, and introduces Ken Wapnick to us. And then the next page, 2nd edition. In 1992, the Foundation for Inner Peace attempted to remedy this situation by publishing the 2nd edition. This was produced by going back and checking the 1st edition against the text. Additionally, quote, all retypings, as was Helen's original shorthand notebooks, were consulted to trace the errors and omissions that were found. The 2nd edition, in other words, was needed to clean up the problems that had occurred along the way. Ken was apparently in charge of any editing done. Helen and Bill had since died. Now, a little more information on the next page. It's important to note that Bill was placed in charge of these editing decisions. This was very likely because Helen would not be objective enough to make such decisions. Indeed, she confessed, I wanted to change just about everything. Next page describes the actual editing, which was far from perfect. There were serious drawbacks, which we will see as we look at the editing process in more detail. Helen was clearly the primary editor throughout, even though Bill had been assigned the most important part of the job. Being assigned by Yeshua, by the way, they ignored Yeshua's instructions. So Helen was deciding what would stay in and what would come out. We say with confidence that Helen was the main editor because one can see the same tendencies, the same hand in all the editing processes that lead up to the publication of the course. And I'll leave this here for you, but skipping down, indeed, in both of those editing processes in which Helen was co-editor, she was actually the lead editor. According to Ken, Helen was the main editor with both the Hugh Lynn Casey version and the 1st edition. In regard to the editing that Helen and Bill did, Ken said Helen was the editor on their team. Bill did not have the patience for it. And on the next page we see Ken reporting that recounting certain events in Helen's life aroused tremendous anxiety in Helen, and her discomfort directly led to an almost fierce over-editing. This is highly relevant for the editing of the early chapters, and Helen was always very ashamed of them. This is so outrageously egotistical. After 7 years of transcribing, getting messages for 7 years and writing them down, after all of that, her ego was so inflamed during the editing process. And even though Yeshua said Bill should do the editing, Helen did it. So what was Bill doing? And then Ken just bowed down to Helen as well. Oh my, next page. This bias against anything specific and concrete resulted in the removal of several major topics in the early chapters. These included lengthy discussions of sex, which was my previous video, of how the course's teaching relates to the teachings of Freud, the previous video, and I included Edgar in that a little bit. The next page gives a very good example of the editing that went on. And then it asks, but wasn't all of this editing guided? And here's where we get into some tricky territory. First, the guiding principle that the author, which is Yeshua, gave for the editing was to make the course applicable to the general reader and correct scribal errors. However, as we have seen, the editors went far beyond this instruction by instituting their own guiding principle, make the early chapters read more like the later ones, especially by removing specifics. That was definitely part of the problem. Second, there were explicit editing instructions from Yeshua that were ignored. The global instruction that Bill should be the one in charge of what got removed, as well as more specific instructions. And in the final Foundation for Inner Peace version, there's one sentence that says, "Miracles make minds one in God." Whereas her original "Miracles make souls one in God," she corrected it to read, "Miracles make souls one in Christ." And then they edited out the word souls, when Yeshua obviously said that first. And that one word is the main reason I am making this video. Third, as we have seen, there were quite a number of rewordings that changed the meaning, rewordings that have every appearance of being errors. We've seen a few of those above, and there were many more. Next page. Second, if what was taken out was removed because it was scribal error, that implies that a huge amount of the first 4 chapters was in error. Almost 60% of their original content was removed, and much, if not most of this, was spiritual teaching, not personal material. Ouch! Now let's look carefully at the next sentence. However, the author, Yehoshua ben Yusuf, of the course did not characterize the early dictation as full of error. Rather, as we saw, he praised it as a strong testimony to truth. This is the early dictation, not the edited version. It's unclear why this sentence is here. Let's look at this next part. But this clearly implies that the beginning contained truth. Yes, not the edited version. The beginning, the early dictation. This is a slight obfuscation or a distraction, I feel. Next page. Overall, the editing has every appearance of being a very egotistical product. I read that. It is intelligent and sincere, yet error-prone and sometimes lacking in attention to detail. A bias against the concrete. Why does this matter? Does this really matter? In one way, it doesn't. Sure, you can say that. This whole physical universe doesn't matter. Well, let's look at the other hand. 45,000 words had been removed from the original dictation. Oh my. And our experience, this is the Circle of Atonement people talking, is that this additional material has made and continues to make an immense contribution to our understanding, appreciation, and application of the Course's teachings. And up until they made this version public, they were the only ones who got to experience this information. At the bottom, when people encounter ideas like this, being the mind-blowing, ideas that are new and unfamiliar, that challenge absolutely everything they believe, they need those ideas stated clearly and plainly, and they especially need to see those ideas related to what is familiar. They need examples, illustrations, and analogies. They need to understand how these new ideas compare to ideas already known to them. And they need to observe the ideas in action. They need to see how they look when applied. I could not agree more. Next page. This is relevant for the early chapters because the same thing happens with the topic of miracles, which is obviously the central topic, given that this is a Course in Miracles. In the original dictation, much of the first 2 chapters originally totaling 35,000 words, is devoted to the topic of miracles. Not only are miracles discussed and described at length, but examples of miracles are given from the lives of Helen and Bill. All of this makes it very difficult to get the wrong impression about what a miracle is. Having laid in place this sure foundation, Yeshua, through the Course, then builds on top of it the towering edifice of the rest of its thought system. Unfortunately, this foundation has been severely compromised by the editing. In the Foundation for Inner Peace version, the first 2 chapters are about 35% of their original length. The specifics are gone, the language is more vague, and the miracle principles originally found scattered throughout chapter 1 have been lifted out of their context and presented as a series of bare, cryptic statements in the opening section. The preface, not the text. The result has been ongoing, fundamental misunderstanding of what a miracle is, with the main meaning of miracle in the Course an expression of love to others, and I would say oneself, and I would say unconditional love to others and self, dropping almost completely from the collective understanding of students of the Course. And this misunderstanding of the miracle has meant a fundamental misunderstanding of what A Course in Miracles is. But I forgive them. Next, the last section, there's still a conclusion, but section 4, all about this version in working on this edition for over 10 years. Our approach has been virtually identical to what Helen herself reported. Bill was adamant in opposing any changes at all. Well, thank you, Bill. He didn't want any changes at all, except Helen steamrolled him. I wanted to change just about everything. The material had a way of knowing what it was doing and was much better left exactly as it was, which nobody allowed to happen. Ooh. And it's very interesting that the Circle of Atonement doubles down on that and then does otherwise. Interesting parallel here. One historian described the guiding rule behind the translation of the King James Version of the Bible as total fidelity to the original, total transmission to the people. That sums up our approach as well, and I would have to say, no, that's not what's here. No. Just by this next section, the maximum inclusion of material, well, that's slightly true. Minimum of word changes, definitely not true. Our changes, therefore, were designed to alter as few words as possible. No, that's not true, actually. They seem to fall back on Appendix 4. All changes are documented, and then there's just a little note, and you have to go down to see what that means. Oh, okay. It's not a direct link. You cannot copy and paste it. You have to type it in yourself. And we'll do some screenshots from there, but continuing on to the next page. Again, this is the main reason I'm doing this. Soul. The term soul is important early on in the original dictation, but begins to fade out after chapter 5 and disappears after chapter 12. It was almost entirely removed from the Foundation for Inner Peace version. The clarification of terms, which was dictated after the original editing was finished, originally said the term soul is not used except in direct quotations because of its highly controversial nature. Now, what they're saying here is it was dictated like the rest of the book was dictated. And what I'm telling you is there is a cosmic Christ consciousness bandwidth that Yeshua was a living representative of. I also believe the Buddha was, and a few other humans have tapped into that for their lifetimes on Earth, and many people can tap into that bandwidth for a little while. But what they're saying in essence here is, after 7 years of channeling the Course and then beginning the editing, they're telling us that Jesus changed his mind about the word soul. That's what they're trying to tell you here. Explain it to me otherwise, but that is what they're trying to say. I find that personally offensive, especially that Yeshua would be concerned with highly controversial nature of the word soul. I think that's completely false. As we know, Helen was an atheist, or at least she said she was. So all of that controversial nature is her own mind. Wow. And this, the Circle of Atonement people are telling you, combined with the fact that the term disappears after chapter 12, indicated to us that the author wanted to limit its use. So the opinions of the Circle of Atonement people are that Jesus was wrong, and Jesus wanted to change his mind. Oops. I guess they know better. We therefore replaced most of the references to soul with a variety of coarse terms. Spirit, okay. Mind, what? Brother, and then son? How? Oh, okay. Fine, I forgive you. But we have also been more flexible about this than the Foundation for Inner Peace version, retaining the term, though changing it to lowercase when its usage reflects normal cultural usage. Ugh. This is clearly highly egotistical. Now, there's just one other word before I jump into my soul exposure. There's one other word that they talked about. Switching around projection for extension. In the first 7 chapters of the text, projection is an umbrella term that includes what will later be called either projection or extension. We changed most of the instances of projection that actually mean extension, but we found it unfeasible to change them all. Some, therefore, are accompanied by footnotes explaining what the term means in that particular context. These two terms are vastly different. Here's just a tiny look at how they start to blur them, but we know there is another use of projection which we will call extension. Every ability of the ego has a better counterpart because its abilities are directed by the mind, which has a better voice, capital V. The Holy Spirit, as well as the ego, utilizes this ability. Oh, that's confusing. But since their goals are opposed, so is the result. Interesting here, the joining of projection and extension. Later, we see everything meets in God because everything was created by God and in God. I love that. To me, that's God-sciousness, the field of cosmic consciousness. God created all of humanity by extending its thought and retaining the extensions of God's thought in God-sciousness. That is the real meaning of extension. Completely different from projection. Then we've got you have made by projection, and that means made things, made relationships. But God has created by extension. The cornerstone of God's creation is humanity, for God's thought system is light. I'll leave this here for you to read on your own if you like, and now I must move on to the soul. When you go to that URL and follow a few others, you end up here in a Google Drive. And the first 4 chapters are divided into a 2-column format. On the left are Helen's notes, and on the right is the current CE version. So it took me quite a while to find the soul segment, so let's go through it here. So, on the left, Helen's notes. If a mind creates without love, it can create an empty shell. That is translated as if a mind expresses without love, it can make an empty shell. Okay. Then we've got, this can be possessed by evil. This can be possessed by evil thoughts. Fine. More importantly, but atonement restores the soul to its proper place is translated to atonement restores the mind to its proper place. Huge difference. I do believe that Yeshua said the soul. The mind is not the soul at all. Then we've got the miracle restores the soul to its fullness, and the miracle restores the mind to the fullness of spirit. Okay, abstraction. Then the strength of the soul leaves no room for intrusions. The strength of the spirit leaves no room for intrusions. Okay, next, the forgiven are filled with the soul, and their soul forgives in return. The forgiven are filled with the spirit, and their spirit forgives in return. Oh boy. There's a lot here that if I were to continue going, I would be drawn down further and further into a rabbit hole of egotistical arguments. And that is why I said that this is probably my last video on A Course in Miracles. As I've also explained in numerous of my videos to you, before I even read the Course, I had a very intense experience explained in this video, which also explains how it was completely tied into manifesting forgiveness on the Mayan calendar. And I was downloaded with the information contained in this contract. And this is an explanation of how to use it. And I am telling you, my dear soul sisters and bro stars, if you use this contract with a pure heart, it will do for you what 500,000 words of A Course in Miracles has not been able to do for most people, but the true message is contained here. If you have any resentment towards any people, you have not done the work. If you have any anger, if you have any fear, you have not done the work. Now, if you use this contract, I am not guaranteeing you ascension into oneness with God-sciousness. But you are in charge of your atonement. Nothing external can help you. In response to what version should I read, my answer is none of them. Sure, take a look through the CE, but as I've illustrated, it is filled with non-direct information from Yeshua. All of them are. They're all filled with the ego. The only real message is unconditional love, is unconditional forgiveness, is unconditional trust that everything is perfect every single time. The last thing I can say to you one more time is, how can you know whether you chose the stairs to heaven or the way to hell? Quite easily. How do you feel? If you want to say, what do you feel? That's fine. I think those are fairly synonymous. It would be hard to answer those questions differently. How do you feel? I feel happy. What do you feel? I feel happiness. I feel peaceful. What do you feel? I feel peace. How do you feel? I feel peaceful. Okay. How do you feel? If you can feel unconditional love to all humanity, you win. Game over. If you cannot feel unconditional love to all of humanity, you ain't done yet. I would also suggest to you that as long as we are alive in physical bodies, and as long as we are on an earth that is being lit by the sun, you might as well love your body and this earth and the sun, and therefore love everything that physically exists and everything that spiritually exists. You might as well. If you pretend that nothing physical has any importance whatsoever, you'll probably just end up being really cold and alone. Maybe I'm wrong, but if I am, please forgive me. In Lak'esh Alakim, crispy out.